Welcome to the Wealth Acceleration Podcast with your host, wealth coach Wade Reed.
Hey, what is up, Money Masters? It's Wade Reed again here for another episode of the Wealth Acceleration Podcast. In the last episode, we talked about retirement plans, and today I feel inclined to talk about retirement planning. And within that, what age makes sense to retire? Does it actually make sense to retire? If and when I retire, what do I do after I stop working? And what happens to people who don't really have a plan? And how about this one? How do I not run out of money? That might be the biggest question on people's minds. How do I not run out of money? So let's dive in. Part of the reason why this comes to mind for me is because one of the groups that I spend time with is hosted by a gentleman named Todd Langford. Todd Langford is like a guru of analytics when it comes to retirement planning, and he's built a software called Truth Concepts. This is something I've been aware of since about 2014. I've been to many of his trainings. I've utilized his software in many cases with my clients, and it's a way to tell the whole truth when it comes to financial decisions. And the reason why the whole truth matters is because oftentimes when we do math with money, we forget a couple of things. And one of those things is the factor of time. And another of those things is that interest is always involved in the calculation when we do money math. Typical math with just numbers is just math. But when you deal with money, money has a growth potential, and it has a declining value due to the inflation that's happening in our country. So we always have to calculate in time and interest. So these calculators help us do that in regard to many different aspects of the decisions we make regarding retirement, both the preparations for the accumulation phase as well as the distribution phase when we're taking money out of our retirement plans. And that I find is the scariest thing for people who are 55 and older. Their most common concern is, and if this is you, you probably fall right in here, will I run out of money in retirement? So let's dive in. I want to talk to you first about the concept of retirement. Retirement really came from the old age of literally getting old. Back in the day when we were subsistence farmers, and when the Industrial Revolution was happening, people on farms would literally get so tired and weak that they would have to let their kids take over the farm, and they would be cared for by their children, who were then adults, of course, and taking care of the land and providing food, water, shelter for them. And this only really happened when the body was so broken down it couldn't continue to work. The elderly person might continue to do a little bit of work, but very little overall. They didn't do much on the farm anymore. They passed it on to the children, and then the children took care of them. My grandfather was one of these, and he just passed away 5, 6, maybe 8 years ago. He was 92. He was a farmer, and he sold his farm to his son and had a small stipend for the rest of his life because of his son managing that farm. Like, this isn't that far off, guys. This stuff still happened and still happens in some cases. Well, what about the Industrial Revolution? When people were working in factory environments, they worked long, hard days. And back in the early 1900s, particularly up to around year 1932, 1935, somewhere in that range, people's life expectancies were literally age 65. That was it. Age 65 was death age, not retirement age. And so as the body started to break down and they could no longer perform productive work in the factories, there needed to be a way to get the older workers out and get the younger workers in to do more productive work. And so what happened? I want to share with you an article that this friend of mine and mentor, Todd Langford, wrote up on his website. So I'm going to share my screen, and those of you who are not watching this, you might want to pop over to the YouTube version of this and look at it. If not, just listen closely. All right, so what you've got on the screen here is this article that says retirement, how 87 is the new 65. And we get some context to what's going on in the retirement world we live in today, and where the Social Security system came about and what the challenges are that we're dealing with. So here it is. The life expectancy of men in the year 1935 was 58 years old. And we have what happened somewhere in the late 20s to early 1930s. The administration of the government was looking at how do we effectively get these older people some sort of social safety net. And you'll notice here the German government settled on age 70 to begin offering financial assistance. What was the catch? It aligned with the life expectancy of that period of time. The system was effectively created to support those who managed to live beyond expectations. It wasn't designed to offer 20, 30, or even 50 years of support. So sit back with me for a second on this. The Social Security system upon which our government mirrored was that from Germany. Germany set up a social safety net for retirement for those who reached life expectancy. And if you reach that old, like, let's just help you guys out. Let's use some of our tax dollars to help make sure you have a good, decent existence before you pass on. And so we look at that, and in 1935, when the American government officially implemented their own form of government-supported retirement, the Social Security Act was passed, and the official retirement age was set at age 65. But as I've got highlighted here, the life expectancy for men in 1935 was age 58. So it was actually far beyond. If you lived to age 58, you were supposed to have passed on already. Age 65 was like well past that. So why not as a nation support people who are that age, right? Doesn't that make a lot of sense based on that thinking? The challenge is that today we're living longer. The modern expectation of retirement to this day is still 65. We've got it in our head since 1935 that Social Security should and must pay us starting at age 65. Why are we still retiring at age 65? Only because it's in our minds. It's a concept of the mind, and the system that is available to us makes funds available for free, basically. At age 65, age 67 is actually the new 65. So the government has made some minor changes. They've pushed it out to age 67 now to be what's considered full retirement age. Life expectancy, continuing on in the article, has steadily increased in the last 85 years, and thanks to advances in medical field and quality of life improvements, we don't see the rise of life expectancy slowing down anytime soon. So for those of you who are on the visual version of this podcast with me, there's a chart on the screen, and on the screen it says there's a vertical left-hand bar that says life expectancy from birth, and then to the right-hand the x-axis from 1950 to 2100, the year 2100. And we have this steady increase from left to right, starting lower at the left-hand side and higher at the right-hand side. So we have an increasing life expectancy. And then there's this red dotted line in the center that says current. So in 2024, when this is being recorded, life expectancies are approximately 78 years old. And I'm going to pull on the screen here. This is a mortality table. It's a literal mortality table that was taken from the American Academy of Actuaries. And actuaries are people who study the statistics of life expectancies. And so on the left-hand side here, we have a male at age 1. Their life expectancy from birth is 75.72 years. A female is 79.89 years. So a man is expected to live 75.7, let's call it 76 years, and a female is supposed to live 80 years based on today's life expectancy if you are born today. Well, what if you're already 67? What if you're at that proposed retirement age and you're like, man, I'm ready to retire. The Social Security system is going to pay out. I'm going to be able to stop working. Well, let's look at that. This person is expected to live at least another 20 years, according to the tables here. So age 67, it has LE, life expectancy, 20.4 years. You have at least 20 years, statistically, that you're going to live, age 87. So the title of this article, 87 is the new 65, is based upon this Social Security system that came out of Germany first and then was instituted in the United States in 1935, and that according to analysis today is bankrupt. This thing is supposed to be bankrupt by 2034. There are no funds to pay out those who are on the Social Security system. Now, I know for years and years, in fact, decades, there has been talk about the concern of the Social Security system collapsing, and our current administration is saying that will never happen, and our current candidates for presidency, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, are saying that will never happen. But reform does need to happen. Things do need to change such that the system of retirement that we are used to doesn't force us into retirement purely because there's an income available to us. But preferably, we retire because we're retiring to something, not from something. Too often in my career, I've come across people who are sick of working. They don't like to work anymore. And the reason for that is usually because they haven't found joy in their work. They've kind of gotten tired of it. They haven't had enough variety come up in the way that they're working. And so I've got a story that comes to mind. One of my friends and mentors, when I had a relationship coach, she told me about her father, who was just so anxious to retire at age 65, just could not wait. All his adult years, he looked forward to retirement. And she told the story of how when he finally retired, literally within days, he was found dead in his garage. Well, why would that be? Why would somebody who can't wait to retire to go do fun things in their life pass away when they retire? Well, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence about this where people who retire from something that they hate and don't really have a clear plan for their future end up passing away earlier than typical life expectancy, and they don't get to go do the fun, enjoyable things they had anticipated doing when they retire. And that's really disheartening for me as a young man who's been in the income planning space, in the accumulation space, training, coaching, educating, mentoring people in regard to how to build up a surplus in their lives that they can use to prepare for a retirement if they choose that, and when. To have the choice of working rather than being forced to work. Well, I'm going to add one more suggestion in here. I think work is a gift from God. Our ability to do something productive in life, to solve problems, to create value, to serve people. Work is actually a gift from God that gives us motive, that gives us purpose, that gives us a direction in life to shoot toward, that helps us create goals, that helps us build relationships. And when we stop doing that sort of productive work, we lose purpose. And when people lose purpose, they don't really have a will to live, and so they end up dying sooner. This is my interpretation of the data that's out there about people who retire and then pass away before typical life expectancy. On the flip side, I have a grandfather who lived to age 96. Another who lived, I mentioned earlier, lived to age 92. A grandmother who lived to age 92. This is longer than typical life expectancy. Why? Well, they retired to something. My grandfathers were active in our church life, and they retired from their active earning work, and in retirement did service work. They worked within our church. They did community service. They did missionary service, actually, a couple of times. And so because they had a clear purpose for their lives, in fact, they would fix kids' bikes. They would go serve their other neighbors in the community, cleaning up their yards and just being of value to their neighbors. It was really inspiring to have a legacy of service after a formal career. And so when you retire to something, you're more likely to maintain that focus and purpose. So let's get back into this thinking. So 87 is the new 65, retirement income planning, worrying about running out of money. Well, what if you're on the cusp anyway? Maybe you are actually retiring or preparing to retire, and you're going to say, "Phooey, wait, I don't care about all these statistics you're talking about. I am done. I am tired of working. I'm going to go do something else." Well, that concern for running out of money. So ideally, you will have built up a bunch of cash in some form of savings plan. More often than not, people have 401ks today that they're utilizing. And one of the biggest concerns about that is that it's still at risk in the stock market. And I mentioned this in the prior podcast. There's all this volatility that's going on in the stock market, and that creates anxiety for those who are retiring. And so there's an analysis out there called Monte Carlo simulation. Monte Carlo simulation is a way to look at all the market histories. The history of the markets from 1901 to today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500 index, And what it does is it takes all that historical data and it will run a variety of scenarios, thousands of scenarios, varying when those negative years happen and when those positive years happen, all possible scenarios. And it takes a portfolio of, say, $1 million and says, okay, if we take out a certain percentage of that every year, how long will the money likely last given all these variety of scenarios? Assuming a 15-year retirement, a 20-year, a 25, a 30, and a 35-year retirement. And after all that analysis has been done, in order to have high confidence, I mean above 90% confidence that you will not run out of money, you can only take 3 to 4% of your portfolio. So if you have $1 million, that's only $30,000 to $40,000 a year that you're with confidence able to take out of your portfolio. And if that's all you're living on, and maybe Social Security is bringing in another 20,000, maybe 30,000, but you're used to living on 80, 90, $100,000 a year. Now you're only living on $60,000 to $70,000 a year. You don't have any deductions because your house is maybe paid off. You don't have children in the home anymore. You don't have your interest deduction on the mortgage on the house. So you're maybe even at the highest bracket that you were in prior to stopping working. And so you've been deferring tax into the future. Now you've got to pay tax at the same tax rate or even higher tax rate than you were when you were deferring tax during your active earning years. Now, that's not always the case, but sometimes it is. And so we've got to think about the distribution phase of retirement. And just as we start taking money out, how do we effectively buffer against that volatility in the stock market? And that's where, as I mentioned last time, having whole life insurance as a part of the portfolio, because it's not subject to the stock market, and having built up some cash value, having shifted money from risk-based assets over to non-risk assets or completely safe assets like the cash value buildup in whole life insurance, allows you, when you're taking out money from your risk-based portfolio, if you have a down year, instead of withdrawing money and incurring the loss in the overall portfolio, you can instead draw money out of the non-correlated, no-risk asset of whole life insurance cash value, and thereby allow the risk-based portfolio to recover from that loss. Let it have some time for a year or two, and then we start distributing money back out of the risk-based portfolio. This is how retirement planning used to be done. A pension was a mix of risk-based and insurance-based products. So we have the whole life insurance as one asset class, and then you have annuities, a variety of annuities. You can take a portion of your retirement plan, convert it from a risk-based portfolio into a guaranteed income portfolio. It's called a single premium immediate annuity, or SPIA. These are really cool if you have a baseline that you need to cover and you've got some surplus that you don't need for liquidity day to day. You can take $100,000 to $500,000 and turn it into an immediate annuity and have a guaranteed income for the rest of your life. And what that does is ease the mind, knowing at least my baseline is handled. So as I do retirement income planning for clients, I look at these scenarios and I go, okay, Social Security, is that going to cover your basic living expenses? Usually no. Your risk-based portfolio, do we need to shift some of that into an income annuity so that you have absolute assurance that you have a guaranteed income for the rest of your life in addition to Social Security? And what number does that need to be? And then aside from that, if you have time prior to retirement to grow that portfolio, a fixed indexed annuity might make sense because you eliminate all the loss potential, but you maintain upside potential. And that can be anywhere from 5 to 8%. It's not super sexy, but that's about what you're doing on average anyway in the stock market. So if you can eliminate the downside and use a product that's backed by actuarial science, the statisticians who study life expectancies, who then create products that allow for certainty in the mind, because money is largely a psychological game, guys. Right? I've talked about this before as well. The mindset of money, it's largely an energetic thing. It's based on our beliefs from growing up. It's based on the beliefs that we've developed based on experiences that we've had over time, other people's stories that they tell us and their experiences about life. And we try to find something that really works for us. I find a lot of different belief systems. I came across a prospective client recently who was just absolutely distraught. They had several $100,000 in the bank. They had a paid-for house that was a rental property. They had a house that they lived in that had a mortgage on it. They had a skill set that was highly valuable. And yet, based on beliefs that they had developed growing up, they had this great fear that they would run out of money, that they would be left out on the street and have nothing. Felt poor, even though they had quite a bit of wealth, considering the circumstances of their life. And so the mindset game we have to work through. If you have some fears, sometimes you need to do some writing exercises, hire a therapist, work with a coach that can help you overcome those things and get the perspective of many other people's experiences so that you can gain confidence in your understanding of money. And as you understand money and the different products that are available to you, then you can make wiser decisions that you feel really, really good about. And there, for whatever reason, are negativities in the market about different types of products. But if you have an open mind, you can at least explore them and go, oh, well, here's the pro, here's the con of using that particular vehicle. Am I okay with the pros and the cons? And if so, you might say yes. If not, you say no. And it's fine, but it's worth understanding what's out there for yourself, doing some of your own research, rather than just hearing some soundbite that says this, that, or the other is bad, and then just going with it. So my invitation last time was ask some better questions. Ask some of the questions about the history of how things have come to be how they are today. And I'm bringing some of that back to you with this article about where the Social Security system came from and where the notion of retirement came from. It's really quite new. Only since 1935 have people started to think about the idea of retiring from work as opposed to working their entire lives. We often seek leisure as opposed to doing the purposeful work in our lives. And so I want to be clear. Retirement has a very important place, given that we have clear purpose for what we're doing. If we have done a lot of good in our employment years, in our career, in our businesses, and we just have a preference to stop, maybe there's somebody who's better to do the job that we're doing, and we have other things we really want to get to, hobbies and service work and mission work and perhaps a side business you want to do that's different than what you're doing now. You just want to pursue a dream. Those are all great reasons to shift working from one place to another. Shift your active, the way you're spending your time actively from income generation to some other service or possibly, again, another income generation activity. And here's another thought. I have a client that just comes to mind suddenly. They were an airline pilot making really good income, but just tired of it, tired of the bureaucracy associated with their work environment, tired of the hours associated with it. And so they officially retired from that, have a good sized portfolio to live on, but not really ready to live on it completely. So he found some part-time work driving tractors. Like the dude just likes to be out physically doing something. And so he stopped being an airline pilot and he's working driving short haul truck and heavy equipment, right? It's like a kid in the sandbox as an adult. Right? How cool is that to still have something productive to do? Now, on the flip side, I have a gentleman who, really sad for this man. He decided to retire at around age 65. He was just tired of working, thought he was ready to retire, didn't really work with anybody to plan his retirement, to help him make sure that he was going to be okay. And he retired too soon. There really wasn't enough in the retirement plan. There wasn't any sort of pension coming in. And so this guy is building up a bunch of credit card debt. It's a really sad situation. And so I'm informing him, look, you are at a position where you absolutely cannot keep working. You cannot stay retired. You have to get back to something productive because you don't have enough income to support these debts that you're building up and the back taxes that are due. So sometimes people are so tired of their work, they want to get out, but then they're actually not ready. And then they hesitate to get back to productive work because, quote unquote, I'm retired. I'm not supposed to be working anymore. But he's got 20 plus years ahead of him in life, and there's just no way that he can live off the meager existence that he has right now. So some people have to go back to work. They're forced to. And I don't really want that for you. Whether you're young or old right now listening to this, if you're retiring or far from it, like get in the mindset of, I'm going to prepare today because the future does matter. Like, I think about this a lot because it's kind of a difficult emotional battle to see people really want to retire and not have the funds to do it, not know how to calculate it because of the illiteracy around money. And this goes back to my prior podcast where I talked about the pension system, where nobody really needed to understand the financial system very well because their employers, if you worked 30, 40 years for them, would guarantee you an income for the rest of your life. They would have been setting aside part of your salary into a retirement plan and then would have given you a guaranteed payout. So it's basically, you go do the work, you will be okay. But in 1981, when the first 401k was administered, and then from there it became ubiquitous, and pensions have, for the most part, gone away completely, we've had to become really astute financial people. And those of us who don't, I mean, obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you're in that group of people who's willing to at least start listening, to start developing your thinking, to start developing your understanding about money, to become what I call a student of money. Asking the questions, reading the books, listening to the podcast, meeting with somebody. If you're in that position, you're likely to be more successful. You're going to understand how to do the math associated with money, including the interest and the time associated with the calculation. You're going to ask good questions. You're going to be mindful of how you manage money, and you're going to build up a surplus. Oftentimes, we're so used to living paycheck to paycheck that we really don't see a future value. It's so far away, it's hard to even imagine. But I assure you, if you're in a position where you're not really saving much, it's just eating away emotionally at you. But if you can get into a position where you have some savings, and then that some savings can continue to build, you avoid the lifestyle creep that often happens. Lifestyle creep is where your income increases and then your lifestyle increases to meet or exceed your extra income that's coming in. If you can maintain a pretty regular living lifestyle, but you have increases to your income over time, you'll naturally be saving more. And as you naturally save more, you'll have a temptation to use it for something. It might be to go buy a new car, to take a trip. Those are leisure things. Those are lifestyle choices. But if you recognize in the future, I don't want to be the guy who has to go back to work or the gal who has to go back to work. I want to be in a position where I have ultimate choice and authority over my life, where I get to choose who I work for, the type of work that I do, when and if I actually formally retire, what I retire to when that time comes, the trips I want to take during my life as well as toward the latter years of my life, and live retired today in a sense. Mentally, I want you to live retired today in that you enjoy your wealth, you have some set aside for play, you get to do some of your trips, but also that you prepare for a future where if you want to retire or have to because your body's breaking down, that you have funds to do that. And the thing is, the really hard part about retirement planning is getting that first $100,000 built up. That's the slowest part. But once you got 100,000 or more, that 100,000 can start working for you. And the earnings of interest from investments and even just bank savings and CDs and things, that can be adding more value to it. And the more that builds up, the faster it compounds, and the faster it compounds and gets bigger and bigger and bigger without you having to do extra work. So it's just that beginning phase of getting that first $100,000 if you're not there. And then before you know it, that first $1 million will be in the bank. Now that might seem astronomical to some of you because you're new to your work life. You might be younger. If you're in your 30s, 40s, it starts to feel real, like, oh yeah, I'm starting to get some money built up. If you're in your 50s, oh my gosh, like this is for real. Retirement is on the horizon, it seems like. I better get my stuff in order and get some money built up so that I have at least the option to do it, not be totally a slave to whether or not Social Security system is available to me. So in your minds, I want you to think about the idea that 87 is the new 65. That's when you should expect to be living to at least and doing something productive through all of those years. Find a work that you love so that you don't feel like you are working. When you're doing work that you love, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like a vacation. You're enjoying the people that you spend time with. You're enjoying the work that you do. That's a life that I want for you. As a money master, I want you to master the mindset associated with living a life of purpose, something that you enjoy, not just getting a paycheck or not just working for somebody because of the benefits that they offer, but doing work that you enjoy for companies and people that you enjoy working with. That's really what I want for you. So your takeaway from today is have the mindset that you're going to work because work is a gift, and having purposeful work is the ideal scenario, and to go seek that. Get into a position where you have enough savings that you have the choice to walk away from a job you don't like so that you can find work that you do like. Maybe you have to go upgrade a skill. Maybe you have to just switch employers because the work environment's getting toxic. And if you have savings, you can deal with a few months of being without work if you have to, so you can go do something you really love. All right, guys. So retirement income planning, you don't have to run out of money. Understand the different products that are out there. Be willing to have somebody work with you in your life to help you understand it. Read a few books, watch some webinars, continue to listen to this podcast, become a student of money, and you'll be able to retire if you choose to. All right. Have a great day. Take care. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for tuning in to the Wealth Acceleration Podcast. We hope the insights from today's episode help you streamline your finances and grow your wealth stress-free. For show notes from today's episode and more tips on creating a comprehensive wealth-building plan, visit moneymasterycoaching.com. Remember, financial freedom is attainable. Until next time, keep accelerating towards your goals. See you on the next episode.